Hello and good morning from Rockland. I'm your host, Thomas Stockting. Coming up on this programme, Truth and Reconciliation Day, COVID-19 update, city's finances assessed, fire at the Walmart parking lot, and local backlash to vaccine passports. We start this week's show by diving into the events of this Thursday as the country celebrated the first official Truth and Reconciliation Day. In Clarence-Rockland, the public library located just over the road from our studios here at TVC 22 put on a bilingual display of workshops, stories and more presented by a young local girl called Abigail Collins as well as a local artist called Louise Vien from the Mi'kmaq and Métis First Nations respectively. Stick around as later in the programme we'll bring you interviews with Abigail's father and library CEO Catherina Rouse. Mayor of the city of Clarence-Rockland, Mr. Mario Zant, addressed residents later on in the day with a speech from City Hall.
Clarence-Rockland is situated on unceded, traditional and ancestral land of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee nations. The city of Clarence-Rockland gratefully acknowledges these Indigenous nations for their guardianship of this land, and we honor them. Dear residents of Clarence-Rockland, today is the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, where we remember and honor the lost children and survivors of residential schools, their families, and their communities. It is time to solemnly acknowledge the hurt and harm this system has caused. Survivors have requested reparation and accountability, and it is our duty as Canadians to do so. Nous devons nous considérer privilégiés que les communautés autochtones nous tendent la main et nous offrent cette occasion de réconciliation. Nous contribuerons tous à créer un meilleur pays en faisant les démarches pour comprendre et reconnaître leurs douleurs. Les horreurs des pensionnats autochtones font malheureusement partie de notre histoire. Comme vous, j'ai été horrifié d'apprendre ce qui s'est passé dans ces institutions. Ce qui est le plus triste cependant est que les communautés autochtones en parlaient depuis des décennies et personne n'était à l'écoute. Cela vient de changer. What can we do as individuals to contribute positively to this day? We can start by asking ourselves, what does reconciliation mean to us? What is the symbolism of wearing orange on this important day? More than that, we can listen with an open mind and heart when members of our Indigenous communities explains what reconciliation means to them. We also need to take concrete action. Last September 20th, this municipal council adopted a resolution to commit to recognizing today as National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and to ensure that public commemoration of the history and legacy of residential schools remain a vital component to the reconciliation process. Ceci n'est que le premier pas, car nous pouvons bien entendu faire beaucoup plus. La Commission de vérité et de réconciliation a publié son rapport final le 2 juin 2015. Ce rapport comprenait 94 appels à l'action visant à réparer les séquelles des pensionnats et à faire avancer le processus de réconciliation canadienne. Certaines des actions peuvent être réalisées à l'échelle locale par les gouvernements municipaux. Nous étudierons attentivement ces appels à l'action et mettrons en œuvre celles qui sont bénéfiques à la communauté de Clarence-Rockland. Merci à vous tous qui ont pris le temps aujourd'hui de souligner cette première journée de la vérité et de la réconciliation. Je reconnais que ces activités ont été organisées en peu de temps, mais vous avez toute ma gratitude pour votre initiative. In closing, I would like to leave you with this quote from former Justice and Senator Murray Sinclair, who served as the chairman for Residential Schools Truth and Reconciliation Commission from 2009 to 2015. Quote, I did say at the end of the TRC report that we will not achieve reconciliation in my lifetime. We will probably not achieve it in the lifetime of my children. We may not even achieve it in the lifetime of my grandchildren. But if we make a concerted effort, then eventually we will be able, someday, to wake up and to our surprise, find that we are treating ourselves or each other in a way that was intended when contact was first made. Merci. Thank you.
Keep an eye out on TVC22's channel for the full coverage of the events that took place on Thursday. You can also go and find them on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. Now, let's take a look at the current COVID-19 pandemic situation in Prescott-Russell. At the time of recording, there were 36 active cases in the United Counties, of which 9 were in Clarence-Rockland. Earmarked as a region heading in the wrong direction last week, Dr. Paul Roumeliotis of the Eastern Ontario Health Unit explained that although most areas are doing well, Cornwall's case count is worrying. With 85% of active cases and 100% of the hospitalizations and ICU admissions in our area in residents who haven't received 2 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine, Dr. Roumeliotis hinted at a direct correlation between the lack of vaccination and the higher number of active cases.
Well, yes, you are correct. Provincially, we're seeing a flattening of it. I can tell you that for most of our area, we're following those trends. If you were to look at curves within the other areas outside of Cornwall, that we are following those flattening trends that we're seeing. The Cornwall situation, we think is a complicated one, and we think that we're tracing most of our cases from the unvaccinated. And so that is a challenge to us to be able to address the unvaccinated population, go to them, use different techniques to address them. We've always had higher rates of hospitalizations and mortality and morbidity with viral illnesses in our area. So that's why I always worry about Cornwall. I know initially Cornwall was spared. It was more in the Prescott-Russell area. So now, yes, I am concerned about it, with the exception of the Cornwall area, like I've showed. The rest of the area is very stable. And again, it has to go with the percentage of vaccination that is lower. And most of the cases that we're seeing are driven by the lower vaccination rate. So we're working hand in hand with a lot of our partners, trying to identify areas that are well, we know where they are, but we're trying to identify individuals so we can go address them as best we can, because that, I think, is going to be the solution. And it's a difficult one. It's a frustrating one. Like I said, I'm looking at the numbers provincially. I'm looking at the rates of positivity among young children that going down. So I'm hoping that we can follow that trend. But we certainly need to continue towing the line here. We need to look at maintaining our current public health measures and make sure that people understand that we have higher rates and that we need to take care, use the precautions, use our lessons learned, and very importantly, get vaccinated. It's probably not as simple as a vaccination rate. There may be other social demographic factors or other things there that are in play, attitudinal and so on, hesitancy and so on. But I think the major factor that we can immediately address is the under-vaccination rates. And I showed you that they're far lower than the remainder of the population. And so, and on top of that, we also have a more vulnerable population. So that's why we ending up with more people hospitalized. Not to say that we're overwhelming our system, but we do get persistence, and most of our hospitalizations are from Cornwall, and we do have underlying, like I said, socioeconomic disparities and so on. But the thing that right now we can address are the vaccination rates.
Across the region, 88% of residents aged 12 and above have received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, with the 18 to 29-year-old age group still at the lowest turnout. Last week, the EOHU released a statement encouraging businesses to implement a vaccine policy. And on Monday afternoon, Dr. Roumeliotis clarified why.
Last week, it was last week that we did we issued a press release saying that we strongly recommend that workplaces institute a workplace vaccine policy, and that's because I want to make a distinction. The passports really are for clients or patrons going to a business or an organization. So the business has to ensure that, restaurants and gyms, events and so on, that the patrons, the customers that come in are basically going to, show their their vaccine proof and so on. That does not apply to workplaces, with the exception of schools and hospitals and long-term care that have had a directive from the government. All workplaces and other organizations are not. There's no obligation for them to have it for their staff. Now, I'm talking about workplaces, businesses, organizations for their staff that are not under a directive. And our recommendation is strongly to have a vaccine policy. And we've set out in our website mechanisms and templates of how to get one, and and to assess your risk. I mean, if your workplace has has a lot of sick people, like a lot of elderly or vulnerable people, that's one thing. You may want to institute a vaccine policy, and the vaccine policy may vary. It may be get tested, or if you can't get vaccinated, it may be that you work at home, or all these things. It doesn't mean mandatory in all settings, but we're just setting out different options for employers. I just want to clarify that. So we're not imposing it on those individuals. We are just, because after speaking to the Chamber of Commerce, they wanted us to make it at least a strong recommendation and leave it to the individuals, the individual businesses and so on. So what we've done is we've given them the templates for that moving forward.
A Prescott Russell Community Services van caught fire in the parking lot of a Walmart in Clarence-Rockland last week. As you can see from these pictures, the fire, which started at about 1 p.m. on Thursday, the 23rd of September, was dealt with quickly by local firefighters. Chief of Protective Services, Mr. Pierre Voisin, explained that thanks to 10 firefighters who responded to the call, arriving on the scene within 4 minutes, the fire was extinguished before it could spread. When asked about the likely cause, Chef Voisin said, "It's very difficult to determine a cause of a vehicle fire, but we suspect it was battery related." No one was injured during this incident, very fortunately, and thank you very much to the work from the firefighters there. Now, recycling in the city of Clarence-Rockland was brought into question earlier this week as a review of the city's operations took place, yielding some positive results, such as the kind of stable finances that not all municipalities across the province can boast. The review naturally suggested some ways to reduce costs, increase efficiency, and reduce waste. One of which was to increase the frequency of recycling collection and reduce how often garbage is collected in order to bring the city closer to the provincial average. Although Councillor Bouchard acknowledged that the city is behind because of the lack of green bins.
I was glad to see the reference to the fleet on there, with looking at more green vehicles on there, whether it's hybrid or electrical. Appreciating that. Now, the only question I had as far as the recycle increase / garbage decrease, I did notice further in the report you did mention have the green bins in there. So my only question is, why isn't bringing forward this as one of the priorities? Isn't the green bin involved in there? Because I mean, and clearly, if you say we're below the provincial average, well, it's because on the bigger cities they have the green bin, program. So, which is the reason why we'd be below, because they would have the green bin in there. So that stat is easily explained. So, if we're looking at having garbage removal at every 2 weeks, but the green bin needs to be a part of there in there. So, if you're not suggesting it in there, is there a reason why it was put in further in the and not part of the main course, if you like, about how to attack this?
A candid answer is no specific reason why. It obviously hasn't been locked. It features in the report so that it can be acted upon. And we like to show all of the opportunities to council so that you can ask these questions and say, do you know what? I think that's a higher priority than you've rated it in the report. The candid reason around some of the changes to garbage recycle compost was that there is a more detailed study coming next year, I believe, around this, and it would investigate. I think you've already done an investigation of landfill composition, that sort of thing, and that would be a key driver. Is better understanding what's going in the landfill. That sort of review is than we do. We're more of the operational and financial. So that's why it didn't make it into it. But I concur with you. I live in a city where, you know, compost is done every week, or green bin is every week, recycle is every other, garbage is every other, and the recovery, the diversion rates, as I understand it, are high. So I'm a big supporter. I think there's a lot to be done in that area, but there is a more detailed study needed on the landfill itself, is my understanding.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all for me. And again, thank you very much for quite a detailed report. It's much appreciated.
At this point, it's important, I think, that council understands. I'm going to take the issue of the green bin and waste. It's definitely something that we're working on in terms of a waste strategy, which will be coming back to you. We are bound by the contract that we have currently. So that limits us as to what we can do. I think you remember we had to revisit it a little while ago. The issue of the green bin was a decision, a discussion that took place with council a couple of years ago, and they weren't interested in pursuing that at the time, and not really for not wanting to pursue it, but just because there was quite a cost associated with it, and said it would be discussed at the next renewal. And we made some dramatic changes the last time we did the waste contract, for those of you that were here, if you recall that. So there was some valid reasons for not pursuing it at the time.
So you heard it there, no green bins today, but maybe tomorrow, a couple of years until that contract is up for review again. So that was your weekly news roundup, but stick around, as after the break, we will give you a look into the public library's events for Truth and Reconciliation Day, as well as a local business owner who was harassed for simply following the law. See you in a sec. Welcome back. On a Thursday morning, we were invited down to the Clarence-Rockland Public Library to learn from the organised events for Truth and Reconciliation Day. We spoke to Library CEO Catherina Rouse and Jerry Collins from the Mi'kmaq First Nations, whose daughter spent some time telling stories and explaining her culture to a young audience. Can you tell us a little bit about the programmes and events that you guys have put on for today, the 30th of September?
Well, today is a very special day, so we had a couple of guests that came in. We had one young lady, Abigail Collins, who came this morning to do a story time in French. Her father is Mi'kmaq and her mother is Métis, and they do a lot of different events to enhance different Indigenous activities. Abigail and her parents frequently go to events and represent their heritage at these events, and they're very proud of their heritage, and it shows. And she did a beautiful story time for the children. Her father actually played the anthem of their peoples, and everybody stood for that, and it was absolutely beautiful music. It was nice to be part of that. And then later on, we had Louise Vien. She's a local Métis artist, and she also did a story time for our Anglophone clientele, our little mini Anglophone clientele, and that went very well. And now she's actually also done a educational presentation on Indigenous peoples and also what they've gone through with residential schools. So we've had a few classrooms coming through from L'Escale for this presentation, and she's also set up a table of beautiful artwork that she's done. Some of the stuff is just incredible, and we're just very happy to have these two very special guests here today with us.
Absolutely, and for yourself and the library in general, why do you feel it's so important to provide these educational events and programs, not just for the younger students, but going forward for the general public as well?
Well, the way I view it is a library is part of the educational process. And for myself and other people of my age group, we did not learn anything about residential schools or any Indigenous, how do I put that word, or Indigenous peoples in our history classes. We learned from the colonial side. The colonial history is what we learned. Actually here all of my staff have been taking an Indigenous Studies course, and it is mandatory for all of my staff because people come to the library and they're looking for information, they're looking for a reference, and we need to be able to help them. Even though we might not know everything, at least we know enough to be able to assist them in their journey. Right? Everybody has to know. There's no reason. It was ignorance before. We didn't know better. Well, now we can do better by learning.
Absolutely, and these events today, 30th of September, are obviously vastly important. Will you be hosting anything else throughout the year as well to continue the dialogue?
Yes, actually at the beginning of November is Treaty Week, and we plan on doing more on that week as well. And I'm hoping we're putting together a collection. I'm hoping to also have, little spotlights throughout the year just to remind people, because this can't be just a one-day affair. It has to be something that is continuous and it's never going to end. And I'm going to try and put some elements into just the library itself, the space. That is actually one of the items on the calls to action, is to bring it into your space, into your workspace. So I'm definitely going to talk to Louise as well and get some artwork in here. And I'm going to be in discussions. Abigail Collins, who was here earlier, I'm going to discuss with her father. He's going to help me out with our land acknowledgement statement as well. We've started with a draft, but we need to improve upon it and get more, get it validated.
Could you let us know in your own words what this day symbolizes to you?
This is a recognition of some of their past crimes that was committed against the First Peoples of Canada. It is the beginning of a first step, shall we say, of moving forward, of acknowledging what's been done, and perhaps trying to repair some of the harm that's been done. But I'm not too sure yet. It's too early. This is the first step. I'm afraid that it might become a holiday for the government. You follow? Mm-hmm. And will be lost and forgotten about.
And how could we move forward to ensure that the 30th of September, Truth and Reconciliation Day, doesn't just become another symbolic gesture, but actually does become what it needs to become, as you
people like you getting the word out. Because First Nations, we won't forget. We will never forget. We've been here for thousands of years on our territories. We'll always be who we are. We won't forget. We have to find out exactly what happened to the children that went missing in the schools. We have to find out why the RCMP and the other people came and took the children away. Why? Can you imagine today if that was to happen? Someone came into your home as a white person. Boot, let's go. You have children in your house? Let's go. We're going to put them on a reserve and teach them Mi'kmaq or Mohawk or Algonquin. They can never speak English again. We're going to force them to grow their hair and do all kinds of stuff that's totally foreign to them. That's where we are, right? So the reconciliation is a step towards undoing all that pain, hopefully. That's what it means to me.
And in an area such as the municipality of Clarence-Rockland, which is fortunate enough as it stands to not have the legacy of residential schools, what would you say to the residents of this area that they should really do for the 30th of September, not only this year, but obviously for the years to come as well?
You know, I'm actually kind of impressed with the people around here. I've been living in this area for a while, since I got back from China, and the people had been actually pretty good. They invited me into their schools to give teachings on the Mi'kmaq way of life and our culture and how we do things and that. I've been in my daughter's school for years, up to grade 6, and now I'm in this school again, this higher school. I've been invited to the local schools and universities to give teachings. That's great. That's all doors being opened. And people are curious. Like the teachers that have brought me here today, they're curious. They want to know. The little kids are curious. Those are the gems that are going to be the ones that are going to change everybody's mind. They're the ones.
And going forward as well, the 30th of September is just one day. What are some of the things that people in Canada, residents, anyone who resides in this country can do every single day, but throughout the rest of the year as well, not just the 30th of September, to ensure that they are being part of a solution to a problem that was created?
Well, educate themselves. Read history. Read some history. Find out who the first peoples are in this country, because most of them don't know. They weren't taught it in school, to be honest. It's not their fault. It was never taught in schools. I went to school, never heard a word about First Nations. Nothing. And I'm First Nations. Never heard a word about it, except for the beatings from the nuns and the priests, etc., etc. You know, but they have to educate themselves. They have to do some reading, or have to Google or something. They have to find out on their own time, you know, at their convenience, who we are. Invite us to their communities. Invite us for a potluck, you know? Because there's ceremonies we can't invite them to, because like the sweats and that sort of thing. They're quite religious ceremonies now, so we can't have them in. But come out to the powwows. You know, they love the powwows. They come out. We have people from all over the world come to the powwows, especially the Chinese and the Japanese and all kinds of people come to the powwows. They love it. They love the food. They love the things we have for sale. We can do the same. They invite us out to their whatever they have, fairs and that sort of thing. We can definitely go out and enjoy that. Invite us out. Invite the elders. That's a sign of respect. Invite the elders. I'm an elder. You know, invite us out and do that sort of thing. That's a great way to do it. I hope that our children's children's children can all hang out together, be friends together. There's no such a thing as color coding, you know what I mean? None of that. I don't want to hear the word, I don't want racism, I don't even want that word to exist anymore. I want it gone. I want the government to step up and just get rid of it, you know, like they got rid of the $2 bill, so it doesn't exist anymore. It's the worst thing there is. Racism is toxic, not only from the person who is on the receiving end, it's a poison. It's the person who's spewing it out is a poison, right? So that's what I want. 100 years from now, every day like this, instead of becoming a dreadful memory, I'm full of goosebumps right now, not happy about it. 100 years from now, I want it to be a celebration, like everybody's happy. You follow?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because right now we're not.
And how do you see us getting there?
Time, communication. We have to talk to each other. We've got to do things together. We've got to overcome obstacles together. That's the only way. When we work side by side, we can accomplish stuff. If we don't, it's not going to work out. Because there are times I fear that there would be another Indian uprising, like we had in Oka, for example. I was there in Oka. I know what it's like. I was on both sides, trying to keep the peace. I was there as a soldier, intelligence operator. I was on one side trying to keep the peace with the army, the other side running with the First Nations. And my only objective was to keep the peace. I remember my captain called me in the office. He said, Sergeant Collins, you have to swear allegiance to the Crown. I said, hello? I did that many, many, many years ago. He said, because of this problem in Oka and your First Nations, we want to know what side you're on. I said, sir, I am on the side of protecting lives. And I left the office. And then I was gone for about 3 or 4 months doing my thing. And I never want to see that again, because there are a lot of very well-trained warriors in this country. And I never want to see that happen. And this day is chipping away at any of that sort of thing. I got a smile on it now, because this day is chipping away at any of those feelings happening. Today's a big day, a big beginning. So we got to work together. We have to sit down and eat together. We have to cry together. Maybe hunt together. I don't know. I don't know what white people do, but stuff like that. But we find out what we do, you know, what each other does, and do it. That's it. That's the best way to do it. And protect the bloody planet. All right.
Set the context for us. Over the coming months, we hope to shed more light on the Indigenous cultures, as well as the ongoing issues that exist in our region. So if you have a story that you think needs to be told, don't hesitate. Please get in touch with me here at TVC22. And for those watching, we may not have all created this problem, but we are fortunate enough to get the chance to be part of the solution. So let's not take that for granted. Ontario's provincial vaccine passport system officially came into effect last Wednesday, meaning that if you would like to do certain activities, such as eating out at a restaurant or attending a concert, you must have received your second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine at least 14 days beforehand. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau even announced that those wishing to get on a plane or train will soon be asked to do the same. There has been some vocal backlash to these decisions, and as reported by CBC and Global News, the owner of a local restaurant in Clarence-Rockland was subject to abuse the day the restrictions came in. I went down to Benny's all-day restaurant to speak with Bill Mahuz, to ask him about the incident as well as the realities of running a restaurant in the fourth wave. Set the context for us. Could you let us know what happened here?
Yeah, I mean, the law or mandate went into effect last Wednesday, and we just had an incident with one of the early customers in the morning. I had to jump in and help the server because he was being, somewhat belligerent and using offensive language, and then sort of started making threats, by orally and verbally, and got a little physical with the hardware, the door outside, and then made some threats. So that happened last Wednesday. And then since then, I would say the majority of people have been, complete support. We're getting calls from, Vancouver, Winnipeg, all the way out to Newfoundland, just thanking us for, doing our part in this and supporting us. But there have been, like we discussed earlier, the silent majority. There's been some threats over the phone, online. And all I tell people is, listen, I'm not taking a stand one way or the other when it comes to the vaccine passport. We're running a business. We just want to make sure it's safe for the clientele and the staff. And so we're just following the rule of the law.
Absolutely. I think that's an important rhetoric to remember. Since then, has it all been all right for you?
It's been all right. Like I say, isolated incidents on the phone and online. Of course, they hide their, they have their anonymity. And, it's just sad that they take it out on business owners and the great staff that we have, when it's, they should be directing it towards politicians that enact these laws and mandates. And but all in all, though, everybody's been great.
And was this the kind of behavior you were kind of like expecting in the lead up to this? I mean, you're a business owner, you're looking at this mandate coming in on a certain date. Is it running through your mind that something like this might happen?
Yes, absolutely. It was a fear of ours, but, came to fruition pretty quickly. They just, I don't know, it was, the lead up to it, you could sense there was some pushback from, the anti-mask, anti-vaccine sort of movement. And, it's unfortunate, but we kind of expected it.
And looking at the course of obviously the last 18 months, service industry workers, owners such as yourself, have had a turbulent time.
Yes.
Could you just talk us through a little bit what it was like for Benny's Diner since the beginning of the pandemic? How have you guys fared?
Yeah, it's been hard, and I know I speak for all my fellow restaurant owners and operators. Having to close is one thing. Having to reopen and then close again and then reopen. Over that period of time, we lost a lot of staff. It was very hard to rehire people. Not to mention all the, they would give us sometimes 1 week, 5 days, 4 days warning before the lockdown or shutdown, and then we'd have to throw away food. We'd give it away a lot. A lot of it, the insurance companies don't cover any of that. That is a separate issue. But the most important thing was the staffing. It's been incredibly hard. The people come back. The customers have all come back, and to be honest with you, business is great. But the pressure on the staff that we do have is immense because they're having to put in extra hours, and it's been very hard finding new employees.
Yeah, we spoke earlier, you and I, about the kind of work you're having to put in as the owner, the
Yeah.
extra shifts, the extra hours you're doing here. So you mentioned staffing there. How are you guys coping? And what do you think the main issue is with people returning to work?
Luckily, my partner, my brother and I, we're both, restaurant lifers. So we have extensive experience in all facets of the business. So we're basically in the kitchen now, 12-hour days. But I really feel bad for restaurant owners and operators that don't have that experience in the kitchen, and some of them have had to close down. I think personally, I think it's the pandemic has kind of shifted the labor economy towards less blue collar and people wanting to work remotely. The programs set forth by the government, CERB, they were great at the beginning, and they helped a lot of our employees and everything. But to keep those programs going is just stifling businesses and our chance to move forward with this and hire people. We're not even getting applications. I put ads out constantly. They're Kijiji, all the on Facebook and Indeed. I'm lucky to get a resume like once every 2 weeks. And even at that, they want to abuse the system. And, we're just not for that.
Yeah, and we're looking at it as well. And like the issue of staff is a huge one at this point. And a potential other lockdown. I mean, we're here talking about this case today because of the fact that people are against the vaccine passport. One of the main reasons the vaccine passport has been pushed forward is to ensure that businesses such as yourself don't have to lock down again like you had to do multiple times over the course of the last 18 months. So tell me, for you, Bill, and for Benny's all day here, a business that's been in your family for over 30 years, what would it mean to you? What would happen to you if another lockdown came in before the end of this year?
It'd be devastating, honestly. I think, forget about us, this is our business, so, we've poured our blood and sweat into it, and we'll keep doing it. But for all our great employees, and it's mentally challenging. It really has been. And to even think of another lockdown like that, I don't know if most businesses could survive it, really.
Is there ever a time you contemplated having to close your doors for good here?
Not for good. Like I say, we are, we have extensive background in this business. If I had to rely strictly on employees in the kitchen, I would have closed, definitely. But we're looking at ways now to try to minimize the stress and the mental effects on all our employees, the mental well health, because we have some employees that are putting in extra hours, and it's great and we appreciate it. But at the end of the day, their mental health is paramount.
And Bill, first of all, I just want to thank you so much for your time. And just to end on, I think, whether it be for yourself, for your employees in your business, or any other business such as yourself out there, what would your message be to the potential customers coming through the doors?
I would say welcome to our place. Nothing has changed. We're following the laws just like we followed the laws 10 years ago, 5 years ago, before this pandemic, when there was smoking and then there was no smoking. We just followed the bylaws. And I remember back then, some people would make a fuss because this dining room was full of smokers. And then we thought, oh my God, I couldn't see a world where there was no smoking. It took a little bit of time and everybody adjusted. And this is the same sort of thing. If you have some issues, please do not take it out on our staff, on our frontline staff, on the girls at the door, ourselves. Please direct your anger towards the people that are setting these policies. We're just running a business and we want it safe for everybody.
Fantastic, Bill. Thank you for your time and all the best going forward.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Bill Mafuz there from Benny's All Day Restaurant here in Rockland. And that's just a reminder to just be kind to the business owners out there. They're not the ones making the decisions. Everyone has their right to complain about them, but these are people just like you and I who are trying to work through this pandemic, and they're trying to survive, and they're trying to keep their businesses afloat. Now, hold tight, as after the break, we will be speaking to Mayor Mario Zant about how the city of Clarence-Rockland plans on moving forward with their role in acquiring both truth and reconciliation for the Indigenous people amongst our region. Now, we heard from Mayor Mario Zant speak from City Hall earlier in the show as Canada marks the first official Truth and Reconciliation Day. And joining us this morning on the couch is Mayor Zant himself. How are you, Mr. Mayor?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, doing well. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this morning. It's greatly appreciated.
My pleasure.
The first place to really start is Thursday. What an emotionally charged day that was for everyone. The first official Truth and Reconciliation Day acknowledged federally, as well as obviously you've had many discussions within the Municipal Council about it. But before we even dive onto that, for you, what were your key takeaways from Thursday? Because you were heavily involved all around the city that day.
The kindness. I mean, it's hard to say because this was the first time, right? So, I struggled with, do I march? Do I not? Is this for the community? Is it not? And you ask yourself these kinds of questions because you don't want to also impose yourself into something that is deeply personal for so many people. And what I really wanted to do was strike that balance and make sure that we were supporting as much as possible any initiative to be able to mark this commemoration and be as available as possible. I mean, it's a hard line, but you know what? I think this year we've learned some lessons. Next year, I think we'll be much better prepared to do this. It was announced by the federal government in June, I believe. It was passed in July, so we didn't have a lot of time to get ready for this.
Absolutely, and communication needs to keep on going. You said yourself about being able to keep in touch with a lot of people around here to ensure that the lines of communication are open. As you say, the event can be better next year. Touching on some of the events that we did have, though, the public library, as we showed earlier in the show, hosted some fantastic events with some guest speakers, and you had a local Métis artist in there as well. What did you make of what was held that morning?
It was great. I mean, the library is, it is technically the learning center of our municipality, right? And they've transformed themselves at that. I mean, libraries typically are, it's just a place where you can get books and movies, right? But what the management team at the Clarence-Rockland Library has been able to do was transform itself into a great learning center. I thought the presentations were great. The staff at City Hall did an amazing job. They didn't stop all day, whether it was hooking up speakers and moving this here and there, making sure that everything is set. So it was really well done, very well done.
And you mentioned the march that occurred. It ended at City Hall, where you yourself did the speech, which again, as I said, we showed at the beginning of this program as well. What were the main messages you were trying to impart with that speech? And I saw you had some lovely conversations with some Indigenous people after that as well around the City Hall. So what were those kind of conversations? What were you hoping to achieve there?
Well, the conversations were essentially an introduction. We have been looking for Indigenous leaders in our community to participate, to have dialogue with, to be able to engage in a process to truly start reconciliation. It's tough to do on the day that is dedicated to mourning those, the victims and their families and the communities of residential schools. But they were incredible with me. We spoke at length at how important the land acknowledgements were, how it was important that we named both communities. They were very happy with that as well. So it was just a really great conversation all around. I was really happy and I was very touched by their comments.
Well, you mentioned there about land acknowledgement. How important do you believe it is for the city to take on board those calls to action? Because I believe there are 5 that are relevant to municipalities, and really be able to I don't want to say run with them, but really like implement them in the best way possible.
It is important. So really quickly, this started with me doing I wanted to read through the 94 calls to action. I think everyone should just read them. Even if you know, this is not something that interests you, read them. They're important. Hundreds of thousands of people painstakingly, you know, gave their stories and horrific moments of their lives in order for these 94 calls to action to come forth, right? And so for us, what I did is I did a search for anything that was municipal related. There were 5, as you mentioned. 2 of them do not apply to the city of Clarence-Rockland because they're directly related to residential schools and graveyards, which thankfully we don't have any in our municipalities. But there are 3 that are very viable, right? So one of which is mandatory training for employees as well as members of council, recognition of the United Nations declarations on Indigenous peoples, as well as just making sure that our bylaws are you know, do not have any references of colonialism. You know, if those are very small prices to pay to engage in reconciliation, and what a gift that we do have for reconciliation after everything we've done, and they actually at the end of that want to reconcile with us. And I think you and I have spoken before on this. Countries have went to war for less.
Much less.
And here they are, they go, you know what, we wanted the truth and we want to reconcile. That's something that we have to embrace as a municipality.
Yeah, and as a municipality, very fortunate to not have that legacy of residential schools here, and like a lot of other places, which is simply part of not only their history, but their present as well. And you mentioned there obviously the 3 calls to action that do relevantly apply to our municipality. I think it's Action 57, as you just mentioned, the importance of education. How high do you place the importance of education? Because it says it's sort of like a pushing amongst public servants. But how high do you place this particular call to action for the staff within the administration and the public servants throughout the whole city of Clarence-Rockland to make sure they are educated on these matters?
So what we're going to do is, if this passes, because the first reading was 2 weeks ago on the 20th, obviously on the 4th we will hopefully be passing that unanimously. And what that does is it essentially provides the municipality with a plan to implement, right? So at that point, once we say, okay, go, a plan has already somewhat been drafted. I've had a look at it to say, how would this look? There are tons of opportunities to be able to educate people. And I think it's important. If you were to ask anyone else, would you be interested in taking training on anything that interests them, whether it's photography or whatever the case is, they most likely jump on that. We're asking for an opportunity to educate them on the wrongs that we've made as a society to make sure that we don't repeat them. And I think that we have that leadership, like I said earlier, to do that. So.
And if this passes on Monday, how quickly would you be hoping to implement said training? Would it be something that happens immediately, or would there be a process to bring it in?
It can't be immediate because there's a lot of research that needs to be done with that. First of all, we need systems to be able to implement those. There's already systems in place for other types of mandatory training that municipalities have to take. But what we're going to do now is essentially, like I said, look at the plan and try to make sure that it's implementable within the year. But it shouldn't take that long. But everything technically, you know, takes on. Rome wasn't built in a day, as we always say. So we're trying to make sure that we put in place a good structure where employees can actually follow the training that is mandatory.
And the 30th of September is obviously now official, but it is only one day. Are you hoping to see more things in our municipality throughout the year that continuously offer education to not only public servants, but obviously the residents at large, especially as the kids in school who are now growing up and have an opportunity, unlike a lot of people, to actually learn about this from a younger age?
That's a good point. You know, reconciliation has many different aspects to it, right? So and that's what I said in my speech. Is that, you know, what does reconciliation mean to you, and what does reconciliation mean to Indigenous peoples? I find that having more communication with Indigenous communities within our municipality helps us to be able to have more, I guess, festivals with them included, right? So Le Festival de la Rivière is a prime example of something that we'd say, you know, you are part of this community and you belong at the Festival de la Rivière, and let's try to have a program that includes everything. That's just one example, but we have tons of other things that we can make sure that Indigenous communities take part in. And when they do, it's a learning opportunity for everyone. You know, I would love to know exactly, okay, well, what does this dance mean to you? And why do you do it? And where did it come from? And it's just an education. There's nothing wrong with just wanting to be educated in something. It's what we do.
And in your eyes, is the onus on the city and the festival organisers to reach out to these communities, or is it up to them to reach out? Where does the communication begin, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
So we'll be talking at council about putting a committee together, an official committee. That hasn't been tabled yet, so this is just really preliminary at this point. And what I envision the committee being able to do is to be able to put forth some ideas on how they would be able to participate, and how we would be able to help them participate, and just start that reconciliation process in our community a little quicker and faster than let's say other forms of government are taking. So.
Well, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining us today for this conversation, Mayor Zant. And maybe next year we might be coming out of this pandemic to see the classic festivities return, but in a more inclusive way, that taking part all different cultures that belong in our region, literally belong.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be great.
Fantastic stuff. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for watching. It's good morning from me, it's good morning from the Mayor, and it's good morning from the rest of the team here at TVC 22. Have a lovely week, and we'll catch you again next weekend. Bye.